The American Civil War, a brutal conflict that tore the nation apart, finally ended in 1865. The war had raged for 4 long years, leaving a trail of destruction and loss in its wake. Families were torn apart, cities were reduced to rubble, and the very fabric of the nation was tested to its limits. The Confederacy lay in ruins, its economy shattered, its social fabric torn. The once thriving southern cities were now ghost towns, and the agricultural backbone of the South was crippled. Plantations that had once been symbols of wealth and power were now desolate and abandoned. The victorious Union faced the daunting task of reunifying the nation and integrating formerly enslaved people into society as citizens. This was not just a political challenge, but a social and economic one as well. The newly freed individuals who had known only the life of bondage now had to navigate a world of freedom and opportunity, often without any resources or support. This period, from 1865 to 1877, is known as Reconstruction. It was a time marked by significant legislative efforts, social upheaval, and the struggle to redefine the identity of a nation that had been fundamentally altered by war. It was a time of immense hope and profound challenges as the nation grappled with the legacy of slavery and the meaning of freedom. The Freedmen's Bureau was established to assist the newly freed slaves, providing food, housing, education, and legal assistance. However, the path to true equality was fraught with obstacles. Reconstruction aimed to rebuild the South and extend the principles of liberty and equality to all Americans. This involved not only physical reconstruction, but also the creation of new laws and amendments to ensure that the rights of all citizens were protected. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were pivotal in this effort, abolishing slavery, granting citizenship, and protecting voting rights. It sought to answer fundamental questions. How would the former Confederate states be readmitted to the Union? This was a contentious issue, with debates raging over the conditions that should be imposed on the southern states before they could rejoin the Union. Should they be punished for their rebellion? Or should they be welcomed back with leniency to promote healing? What rights would be granted to the newly freed slaves? This question was at the heart of the Reconstruction efforts. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the 14th Amendment were designed to provide equal protection under the law and to ensure that the newly freed individuals could enjoy the same rights as other citizens. And who would control the process of Reconstruction, the President or Congress? This power struggle defined the era, with President Andrew Johnson favoring a more lenient approach, while radical Republicans in Congress pushed for harsher measures to ensure that the South would not revert to its pre-war ways. The answers to these questions would shape the nation's future for generations to come. The debates and decisions made during this period would lay the groundwork for the civil rights movements of the 20th century and continue to influence American society and politics. The South in 1865 was a land in transition. The end of the war brought about a seismic shift in the social and economic structures of the region. The old order, based on slavery and plantation agriculture, was gone, and a new order had yet to be established. Millions of formerly enslaved people were now free, but their future remained uncertain. They faced immense challenges, including finding work, reuniting with family members, and securing their newfound rights in a society that was often hostile to their presence. The physical and economic landscape was devastated, with farms abandoned and cities in ruins. The southern economy, which had been heavily reliant on slave labor, was in tatters, and rebuilding it would require significant effort and investment. Political and social structures built upon the foundation of slavery were in disarray. The old power dynamics were upended, and new systems had to be created to govern the South and integrate the newly freed population. The task of rebuilding the South was immense, both physically and ideologically. It required not only the reconstruction of buildings and infrastructure, but also the reconstruction of societal values and norms. The South had to come to terms with its past and find a way to move forward. The nation yearned for healing and reconciliation, but deep divisions remained. The scars of war were still fresh, and the process of bringing the country back together was fraught with tension and conflict. The assassination of President Abraham Lincoln just days after the war's end further complicated the situation. Lincoln had been a unifying figure, and his death left a leadership vacuum at a critical moment in the nation's history. Lincoln, known for his pragmatism and commitment to a lenient Reconstruction, was succeeded by Andrew Johnson, a Southern Democrat with a very different vision for the South's future. Johnson's policies were more sympathetic to the South, which led to significant conflict with Congress. The stage was set for a power struggle between the executive and legislative branches that would define the course of Reconstruction. This struggle would determine how the South would be rebuilt, how the newly freed slaves would be treated, and how the nation would move forward from one of its darkest chapters. Even before the war's end, President Lincoln had begun to formulate a plan for Reconstruction. He understood that the nation had been torn apart by the Civil War, and the process of healing would require careful planning and a compassionate approach. His primary goal was to reunite the nation as quickly and painlessly as possible. Lincoln envisioned a future where the wounds of war could be mended and the country could move forward united. Lincoln believed in offering lenient terms to the defeated South, recognizing that harsh punishments would only prolong the nation's divisions. He was acutely aware that a punitive approach could foster resentment and hinder the process of national reconciliation. His plan, known as the 10% Plan, reflected this belief. It was designed to be a pragmatic and forgiving approach, aiming to bring the southern states back into the fold with minimal resistance. Lincoln's 10% Plan proposed that a southern state could be readmitted to the Union once 10% of its voting population took an oath of allegiance to the United States and accepted the end of slavery. This relatively low threshold was intended to facilitate a swift and smooth reintegration. This plan, while generous to the South, faced opposition from within Lincoln's own party. Many members of the Republican Party were skeptical of the leniency of Lincoln's approach. Many Republicans in Congress, known as radical Republicans, believed that Lincoln's plan was too lenient and did not adequately address the rights of freedmen. They were concerned that the plan did not go far enough in ensuring justice and equality for the newly freed African Americans. The radical Republicans, led by Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner, championed a more stringent approach to Reconstruction. They were determined to reshape Southern society and ensure that the rights of freedmen were protected. They argued that the South should be treated as conquered territory and that the Confederate leaders should be punished for their role in the war. This punitive stance was rooted in a desire to prevent future insurrections and to hold those responsible for the war accountable. Moreover, they believed that true reconciliation required not just political reunification, but also a fundamental transformation of Southern society, including the protection of black civil rights. They envisioned a South where African Americans could enjoy the same rights and opportunities as their white counterparts. The Wade-Davis Bill, passed by Congress in 1864, embodied the radical Republicans' vision for Reconstruction. It was a direct challenge to Lincoln's more lenient approach and sought to impose stricter conditions on the Southern states. This bill proposed a much stricter path for readmission to the Union, requiring a majority of white male citizens in each Southern state to pledge their loyalty to the United States. This higher threshold was intended to ensure a more committed and loyal Southern populace. The bill also called for stronger safeguards for black civil rights and a more active role for the federal government in overseeing Reconstruction. The radical Republicans believed that only through federal intervention could the rights of freedmen be truly protected and the South be transformed into a more just and equitable society. The clash between Lincoln's 10% Plan and the Wade-Davis Bill highlighted the deep divisions within the government over how to handle Reconstruction. While Lincoln sought a path of leniency and rapid reunification, the radical Republicans pushed for a more rigorous and transformative approach. This debate was not just about policy, but about the very future of the United States. It was a struggle to define the nation's values and the extent to which it would commit to equality and justice for all its citizens. Tragically, Lincoln's assassination in April 1865 meant that he would not see the full implementation of his Reconstruction plans. His death left the nation in a state of uncertainty, with the radical Republicans gaining more influence in shaping the post-war era. The period that followed was marked by significant challenges and changes, as the country grappled with the complex task of rebuilding and redefining itself. The legacy of Lincoln's vision and the radical Republicans' efforts would continue to shape the United States for years to come. Lincoln's assassination in April 1865 was a pivotal moment in American history. The nation was plunged into mourning, and the future of the country seemed uncertain. This tragic event thrust Andrew Johnson, Lincoln's vice president, into the presidency. Johnson, a man with a complex background and controversial views, now held the reins of a nation in turmoil. Johnson, a Southern Democrat who had remained loyal to the Union during the war, inherited the complex task of overseeing Reconstruction. His loyalty to the Union was unquestionable, but his approach to rebuilding the South would soon become a source of intense conflict. However, Johnson's vision for the South differed significantly from Lincoln's, setting the stage for a clash with the Republican-controlled Congress. This Congress, dominated by radical Republicans, sought to transform Southern society and ensure equal rights for freedmen. Johnson's Reconstruction plan, announced in May 1865, reflected his belief that the Southern states had never truly left the Union. He saw Reconstruction as a process of restoration rather than transformation. He offered pardons to most former Confederates and allowed them to regain their political rights. This lenient approach was intended to quickly restore the Southern states to their pre-war status. He also gave Southern states wide latitude in managing their own affairs, including the treatment of freedmen. Johnson believed that local governments should have the primary responsibility for addressing the needs of their citizens, including the newly freed African Americans. While Johnson required Southern states to abolish slavery and repudiate secession, he did not insist on black suffrage or other measures to protect black civil rights. His reluctance to push for these protections would have far-reaching consequences. Under Johnson's lenient policies, white Southerners quickly regained control of state governments across the South. This rapid restoration of power to the pre-war elite alarmed many in the North. Many former Confederate leaders were elected to office, and they moved swiftly to enact laws that severely restricted the rights of freedmen. These leaders sought to maintain the social and economic hierarchy that had existed before the war. These laws, known as black codes, varied from state to state but shared a common goal: to maintain white supremacy and control over black labor in the post-slavery South. The black codes were a stark reminder that the struggle for true freedom and equality was far from over. The black codes represented a direct challenge to the ideals of freedom and equality that had driven the Union's victory in the Civil War. They were a blatant attempt to undermine the progress that had been made and to reassert control over the African American population. They restricted the movement of freedmen, denied them the right to vote or hold office, and limited their access to education and economic opportunity. These restrictions were designed to keep African Americans in a subordinate position and to prevent them from achieving true independence. The Black Codes effectively sought to create a system of neo-slavery where African Americans were denied basic rights and relegated to a position of second-class citizenship. This oppressive system would lay the groundwork for the long and arduous struggle for civil rights that would continue for generations to come. The seeds of conflict sown during Andrew Johnson's presidency would grow into a bitter and protracted battle over the future of the United States. The clash between Johnson and Congress set the stage for a tumultuous period in American history, one that would shape the nation's trajectory for years to come.